And we are live on Leadership Redefined with a special guest. Welcome, Dr. Monique Habersham, and welcome, Rich, as well. We are
Morning.
thrilled to have you here. I'll let you introduce yourself in 1 second. Just a little background for the audience. We've had a few folks from Wyandanch School District. We have been lucky enough with Leadership Redefined to be working with the fine folks, the leadership at Wyandanch and Wyandanch School District. And in particular, Monique, we've worked with you, and I think we've learned as much from you as hopefully you've learned from us with your style and in particular around data and putting data into action. But I'd love for you to quickly introduce yourself, and then we'll get into your background a little bit and also what you're passionate about within the educational space as well. Like I said, Rich, welcome. How are you?
Good. I'm very happy to talk to Dr. Habersham.
So, Dr. Habersham, intro, and then we'll get into your leadership style for this podcast that we're really excited about.
Okay, thank you so much. My name is Dr. Monique Habersham. I am the principal in Wyandanch School District of the Martin Luther King Elementary School, which is grades 3 through 5, the LaFrancis Hardeman Elementary School, which is grade 1 and 2, and the LaFrancis Hardeman Annex, which is pre-K and K.
And Dr. Habersham, that is just so the audience understands, those are 3 schools, right? That you're the principal of.
Those are 3 distinct schools that I am the principal of. Yes.
Yes. So we don't want to hear anybody saying stuff about the workload they have. Dr. Habersham has 3 schools that she is the principal of.
Yes.
And they are in different. I know one is where your office is, but the other 2 are really different areas, right?
Martin Luther King we'll refer to as MLK, and LaFrancis Hardeman's LFH. So LFH and MLK are connected by a conduit hallway, so I can get up and go to LFH at will. The Annex is located in Dix Hills, which is about a 10-minute drive from here, and that houses pre-K and K. So
it's not, they're not right all in your backyard there. So
they are not.
Work there. So we obviously know you well and know your style, your leadership style. But talk to us a little bit about your leadership style and what you're passionate about. And I know it's going to be that data piece for you. But leadership style first. What's your leadership style? What's your approach? And specifically, you have 3 buildings, right? That's a really unique and complex thing that you have to consider that a lot of leaders don't have to unless they're at that upper central admin piece. They don't have to consider those pieces. And you do as a principal, which is really unique for principals. So speak to that and your leadership style, if you could.
Well, my leadership style, I'll start with that, is quite unique, if you will. If I were to examine myself based on all the research and the professional development that I received, I have 3 core drivers that assist me. 1 is teacher collaboration, 2 is solutions driven, and data informed makes up the 3. I think the combination of those 3 helps me to be more of a distributive leader, because I distribute the leadership amongst my staff as well. So it helps me to build capacity amongst the teacher leaders, as well as the teachers themselves, as we work in concert with the 3 buildings.
Yeah, and Monique, one of the things I love about you is that a lot of times people that are really data driven don't have like that human aspect, don't have that solutions piece where they know that data has to turn into something, right? So you have a unique ability to bring in all stakeholders and have conversations, meaningful conversations around the data, and that's a unique, I think, trait for our listeners to understand. I want to go back a little bit to you have a unique sort of pathway to get here too. Can you just really talk about that with the audience as well, just so they understand what your perspective comes from too, like your background a little bit?
Okay, this is my 30th year in education. I started off as a special education teacher in Brownsville, Brooklyn, and then eventually moved to Roosevelt, Long Island well, not physically moved there. I graduated from there. I grew up there, but I changed careers and went to Roosevelt, where I became a special education teacher as well as a gifted and talented teacher. And then from there, believe it or not, I went to BOCES, where I was a special education school improvement specialist, where I worked in concert with New York State. So that is where my love and my evidence and my stance for using data to inform all conversations, because you want us to spend judgment, but you want the data to speak to what's happening. And of course, the futuring of where we can go. The data informs teacher pedagogy, teacher practices, teachers' beliefs, policies. So that is where I take my most stringent stance when it comes to developing teachers, from teachers to educators, and having them promote, achieve, establish their pedagogy, which is the art and science of teaching. So you have to be data informed, not just student performance, but what are your lesson plans saying? Are they effective? Are they giving us the impact? Or do we really need lesson plans? Perhaps we need instructional action plans based on the scholar's performance, so that you are differentiating, you are scaffolding, and you are looking at these scholars. You know what they are, but you need to know why they are. So if I'm a scholar who's not achieving well, and there's two other scholars in my group that are achieving at the same pace or rate that I am, why? Why? So I want the teachers to dive a little deeper in their data, just like we have to dive a little deeper when I work for the state into why a district may have been identified for disproportionality. We have to dive deeper into the data, because it tells us the story and it leads us to where we need to go, our futuring, if you will.
Dr. B?
I like that word, futuring, you know that.
You know, I love it. I love it.
And I appreciate how you see the connection very much. So many ways to have a conversation with you about the things that you've just raised. I'm going to stretch the rubber band, see if this makes sense to you, if you agree with it or not.
Okay.
I love the point you made about collaboration and I can't read my own handwriting. Solutions driven.
Solutions driven. Yes.
And being informed by the data. And then as you were saying that, I wrote down, she's really talking about capacity, and then you use the word capacity. And the capacity word slashed with the futuring premise, they go hand in hand. And I think we've talked about that, you and I, more than once. Is such a key piece. But I think there's another C word under here that I think you're going to agree with, and that would be the culture premise. In other words, and particularly in your case, because you've got three buildings to, I'm not sure this is the right verb, weld together.
I'm good.
You have a
I'm
similar
sorry. Yes.
culture, maybe not necessarily identical culture, but a similar culture. Their basic assumptions, their basic beliefs have to be very much integrated among the three buildings. And I often say to students whom I teach that the principal is not the person who creates the culture. I usually say it's the sum of the group that makes the culture. But I think in your case, maybe it's the other way around, that you have three cultures to create capacity in. That's a statement, I guess, more than a question. Does that make any sense?
It makes a lot of sense. So going back to my BOCES/state hat, by coming to a district, I'm not just looking at one building, I'm looking at several buildings. Right. Where the culture needs to be aligned. They need to work in concert. But when you dig deep into the data, they're identified. The state, they're on the radar, as we would say, with the state. So now we have to find the why. So we have to look at the data in each of the buildings to see where the core, or we'll do a root cause analysis, if you will, to find out what the root of the problem is. And once you find the root of the problem, that culture has to be embedded throughout the district and the various schools, the elementary school, the middle school, and the high school. So I think I come from that perspective that capacity can be built district-wide, and in my case, building-wide, because it has to be. We know the root cause. We can do a root cause analysis. We can do a test in hand analysis. We can do a global perspective analysis. We could analyze data forever. But if it's not solution driven, if it's not for futuring purposes, and if it's not to build and change the culture of the district and the practices and the beliefs and sometimes the policies, then it's for naught. It's for naught. So you have to, from my stance, I have to make sure that these cultures are embedded in each of the buildings, because an effective system will run without me. I have to set up systems and supporting structures in each of these areas so that they can run independent of me. So that means, going back to the C word, capacity building, finding those teacher leaders, finding those strong teachers that are serious about pedagogy, the art and science of educating scholars, and supporting them. Yes, Dr. Panato.
I'm so wound up by all the things you're saying, and I'm appreciating it. So here's another C word that I think seeps out of what you're driving at, and that would be catalyzing. I'm not even sure that's an actual word, but I use it all the time. In other words, the strategies that you talk about, the root cause analyses and the other and the techniques that you use to get to the bottom of things aren't necessarily the practice that's consistently used across many districts, as I think you could attest to. And the fact that you're immersing your faculty in using those strategies is a way that you're able to distill down to the culture that you want.
Totally. I'm in total agreement of that. And again, it's not a perfect world. There are some teachers that move. There are some teachers that still need more support, if you will. Data is a scary word. Data is a word that some teachers, seem to shy away from because they think there's always a right answer to data. Data speaks to you. Data can be interpreted in various ways, but then we need to come together and have a common understanding or a common communication or a common perspective of what the data is saying and what we want to do with this perspective of our data and move forward, because it can say various things.
Yeah,
So
that's Jim. I wanted to go back to that piece, that sort of humanizing the data, right? I mean, because it could be intimidating. It is intimidating to a lot of people. It could be almost accusatory in nature if it's not presented the right way, right? How do you, and I think you've spoken to it a little bit in what you just said, but can you elaborate more on how do you transition to a a positive solutions driven, right? Not, hey, a punitive solutions, right? Driven conversation. How do you do that when the data is not saying necessarily what everybody wants to say right? How do you do that as a leader?
Well, I'm going to go back again to my state hat and my BOCES hats, because remember, I came and I worked originally for Nassau BOCES. And then I got permission to cross county lines to come work into Wyandanch and present the data, which was not positive. So now I have to, in my role, be a change agent, deliver disturbing news, if you will, to a district that already knows they have disturbing news, and then begin to talk about futuring and next steps. So how do you do that? You suspend judgment. You don't accuse anyone of having an ineffective system and supporting structures. There are systems in place, they're just not effective, but that's not the message you want to relay to any district, because you're there to assist them and to help them to build the capacity within themselves. So you want to suspend judgment. You always want to go in with the context and the outcome. This is where we are. This is where we want to be. How do we get there? And then you begin to examine the systems and the supporting structures and the human capital, if you will, that are in place to see if you're getting the expected impact. And obviously you're not, because I'm here. So you have to set the stage that it doesn't matter what you say at this point, I'm here. You've been identified by the state, I'm here. So how can we work together to build capacity, look at the data, come up with a common understanding or perspective? Because like I said, data can tell you many things and it can speak to different people in different ways, but we have to have a common understanding of what the data is telling us in order to move forward. So I think it's how you present that you're here in a positive light, although this is an unfortunate situation. You suspend judgment. Suspend judgment. Speak to the data. Speak to the evidence. Don't hypothesize yet. Hypotheses comes when you have the dialogue, because you dialogue to brainstorm, but you discuss to make a decision. So when you know the protocols for presenting data and speaking to individuals in this way, it's a bit more simpler. And again, I agree, gentlemen, most principals do not have this background coming into this position, but I think and thank, I'm very thankful for my years with BOCES in the state, because it has taught me to be more of a proficient data analyst, if you will.
You used a great word too, and that's why I was clapping for a second for when you use the word of dialogue. As a principal now, I'll take you out of your BOCES hat, or take your
Okay.
BOCES hat off again. As a principal, and I know you've done this, you need to create structures with a small s for exchange and dialogue among them, so that they can come to the conclusions that you hope will evolve, and to use one of Al's favorite words, organically, rather than have somebody say, this is what you're doing, this is why it's not working. Best that it comes out from within their own collective souls.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
we're close to time, Dr. Habersham, and I think we could talk to you for hours. One last thing I would love to hear your thoughts on. I'll push a little bit on what you just talked about, a little bit further with that piece. A lot of times you'll be able to sort of adapt to the systems that exist, right? And there's this adaptation piece. But there are times where you have to completely transform too. How do you shift the conversation to adapt to what we've always been doing to completely transform, because what we've been doing has not worked at all? Have you had those instances where you had to do that? And if so, how do you use the data to sort of say, listen, this is not working at all, we have to shift to this? Or are there always little pieces that you say, all right, we can take this and this, but for the most part, we have to change our system and how we think? Have you been in those situations?
Absolutely. One of the major changes that we've made since we've been here is departmentalizing the teachers. Now, I can come in, and I have come into the Wyandanch School District, and I looked at teacher performance data, where, the majority of the teachers are effective or highly effective. And then you say I said to myself, how is that possible when you're performing at the bottom 5% nationally? So then you're only normed against yourselves. So that means you are the best of the not so great, if you will. So then who's looking at or who's conducting these observations? So those are all things that I've taken in the first year while I was here. And the first year is just fact finding, but then just observation, walkthroughs, et cetera, you find the strengths of the teachers. So what had to change, because it's just not working, is instructional practices. Some teachers were stronger in math science, some teachers were stronger in ELA and social studies. So we departmentalized them. They were no longer responsible for teaching all 4 content areas. And that was a total shift. That was not an adaptation. That was a change. That was a necessary change for MLK. I'm speaking to the lower house, grades 3 through 5, because these are the testing grades. And that has proven to be successful for MLK, departmentalization. But again, it was a total change. It was not an adaptation.
And was that did you do that through sort of the data showing them or having them come to the realization that this is probably the most efficient and best thing for the scholars?
Again, you present the data. If I'm here, if I was called into the district because you're performing at the bottom 5% and 90% of your teachers are effective, I need for someone to explain to me how. I need to hear your thoughts about the data. So that was a discussion we had. It was an uncomfortable discussion, but it was a realistic discussion. So when they realized they were not able to justify the effectiveness of teachers and scholars' performance, Then we looked at curriculum, et cetera, but then also we looked at instructional practices.
Amen.
Good. All right. So listen, I want to thank you for being here. I'll let Rich say last word, and then you'll get the final say. Monique, if you'd like to say any final thoughts, you're welcome to it. Rich?
Yeah, there's so much to speak to. I so much appreciate hearing your points of view, Dr. Habison. I would, the restructuring premise of going to departmental in your upper grades. I did that when I took over a building, elementary building myself. Worked wonders to the point where someone once spoke about not undoing the teams, and it was not met with well by the staff nor by the community. They were so taken by the effectiveness of it. And you just don't snap your fingers to do that. You know that better than I, that there's things you need to rearrange and PD on and so forth. But elementary people typically aren't prefer to be the generalist. But that in this day and age, I'm not so sure that's the best way to roll. And in your case, obviously, having done that has been a major structure change and a major culture change that has paid off. And there's much to admire about the points that you make. You should write a book, Dr. Halberstam.
Change agent? What
Something
would
like
be
that.
my
That sounds
title?
good. Go with that.
I think so. You go with like the 007 change agent kind of theme, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
that's
well,
what it sounds like.
yeah, the number, data. I think we could do
Data
something
change
with that.
agent,
Sure.
the DCA.
I love that. Data change agent.
Yeah,
I
Very
love
good.
that. Yes, I can see that. I definitely.
we have to put a little thing on the screen. Copyright Dr. Monique Havisham right now. Right?
That's right. Trademark it right away.
So any final words or thoughts for us? Again, thank you. This was awesome. Love to have you on again at some point.
Oh,
Dr.
I would
Havisham.
absolutely love to be back. And I also just want to thank you all because I think of you as my thought partners. You help me also to interpret the data that I'm not sure what I'm looking at, especially with my action research. So last words for me, I think you are a valuable support for building leadership to examine their leadership practices, to be self-reflective with their leadership practices, and just to be honest with themselves and to say, I need more support here. I'm fine here. I can always improve there. So I thank you all for just holding up the mirror to me and giving me the opportunity to really reflect monthly, sometimes twice a month, on what I'm doing as a leader. I wear, like I said, several hats. You come from the state, you come from BOCES, you come from building leadership, and then it all comes together when you talk it out with individuals like you. So I just applaud you and I thank you so much for, just giving me this platform.
And we echo your sentiments in working with you as a thought leader and learning from you as well.
Absolutely.
Monique. So thank you. Thank you, audience. We'll see you next week. But we appreciate Dr. Havisham. Much to learn. Hopefully, everybody tunes in and watches this. If they didn't catch the whole thing, go back and watch. But we'll be posting it everywhere. Really, words of wisdom here. Thank you.
Thank you.